Hello and welcome to I Can Relate. I'm Jessica Burns. This podcast puts you in the shoes of others as people take us on their journeys of personal and sometimes sensitive experiences. These are usually topics that are not spoken about, and the hope here is that by bringing them to light, it helps others feel less alone in what they're going through. I look forward to embarking on this journey with you as we develop a greater understanding and empathy for one another. Hello and welcome, my I Can Relate family. Today we're sitting down with Katy, and she shares with us the journey she's been on from finding out she was going through menopause in her early 30s. It happens to 1 in 100 women. The main takeaway for her was that the doctors were very talking about the physical. Okay, what's going on? Do we need to freeze your eggs? But there was no focus and no financing going towards the emotional support that's needed for women experiencing and being told that you're going through early menopause. I really enjoyed chatting with Katy, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome, Katy. How are you doing today?
Hi, Jessica. I'm good, thank you.
Would you share a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, I'm Katy. So, I am born and bred in London. I'm 36. Um, I I love dancing. I play the piano, and I'm pretty obsessed with chocolate.
Yes, I love that because I'm sitting here with Tony's Chocolonely right next to me.
Oh, excellent choice.
I hope you don't mind if we just jump straight into it.
Yeah, sure. Let's go for it.
So would you mind sharing with everyone what premature menopause is? I think also known as premature ovarian insufficiency.
Sure, absolutely. So menopause is something when a woman's ovaries stop producing eggs, and she has her last period, and normally happens around the age of around 51. Um, and if it happens before the age of 45, it's considered early. But if it happens to someone who's under 40, it's considered to be premature. But it can also happen to women who are in their teens. So I've met someone who had one period and then never had another one. Um, and it's quite different to menopause happening at the more natural age because it's not a sudden stop. So it can fluctuate with your hormones, and it means that you do still produce some eggs sometimes. So there's quite a common myth that women who go through premature menopause can never conceive, whereas actually there's about a 5% chance. Um, and yeah, and it can happen for different reasons. So it can happen because there's been a trauma to the body, like chemotherapy, or if somebody's had like surgery on their ovaries. But it can also be caused by autoimmune disease, or it can be genetic, or it can just happen with no known cause. So that's what happened to me. It was just sort of spontaneous, and we don't know why. So I've been told that for women under 40, it happens to about 1% of women, which is actually quite high when you consider like how little we know about it or how little we talk about it.
Wow. And so how old were you when you found out?
So I was 30 when I was properly diagnosed, but looking back, I was probably having symptoms from around the age of 26.
Okay.
So it took a long time to really work out what was going on.
Do you feel like there's like there was at the time like information out there for you to like look up and research, or why do you feel like it took so long to get the diagnosis?
Yeah, I don't know if the information was out there. I think I just didn't know it was a thing. I didn't
Yeah.
know that it was even a possibility, which I think is what made the diagnosis probably so difficult because it was just such an absolute shock. I didn't go to the doctors with it in my mind as a possibility. Um, but yeah, I'd had quite irregular periods for years. When I was finally diagnosed, I was having like 2 or 3 periods a year, And I did go to the doctors. I was responsible, and I was told, oh well, sometimes this happens, or maybe you're going through stress. And I was actually diagnosed with stress and referred to like a support group for stress before that,
Oh,
which,
wow.
yeah, and that's quite common actually, because a lot of the symptoms that you have going through menopause, some of them there is crossover with stress. They can be confused, but it just shows the sort of lack of understanding, really, by doctors.
Yeah. What was that like for you? If you don't mind us taking it to that moment when you were told your diagnosis.
Yeah, it was really, really horrible actually. So yeah, I just not been feeling well for a while, apart from the irregular periods. I'd been having like hot flushes. I wasn't sleeping. I was feeling anxious. I put on weight. I had no energy. I was feeling quite depressed. So it was really, yeah, I was not feeling good.
Yeah.
And I went to the doctors, and yeah, I remember I just went after work, had like a 5-minute appointment. I thought it would just be like a formality, and I'd be told like, oh yeah, no, you're fine. It's just stress. And yeah, she just sat me down and said, oh yeah, it looks like you're going through premature menopause. And I just remember the look on her face. She was just sort of wincing as she told me. Um, and I just remember the feeling of absolute shock. Yeah, as I said, did not go in thinking that could have been something that
Yeah.
would have been said. And then I remember I was like, well, what does that mean? And straight away, she started to talk to me about fertility and IVF and freezing my eggs. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't even know if I want children. Why are we talking about this? What else does it mean? And
Yeah.
then she was like, oh, okay. And then she started listing off on her fingers other sort of health implications of it. And I think I was out of the doctor's surgery within 5 minutes with a referral to a specialist. And then I remember going out I had to go to a work event and pretend like everything was okay. And it was really hard.
Oh my gosh. I feel like in that moment as well when you said you had to pretend like everything was okay, that must have been so hard to go straight from that. Because sometimes you don't want to share and you do just want to, put on a brave face, but to go directly from that news, that must have been so hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm the kind of person who I like to quietly process something to myself by
Yeah.
myself before I sort of go to others.
Yeah.
I like to work out what I actually need. And yeah, I think not having that was hard. I remember I think before I went to the event, I called a friend and was like, I've just been told I'm going through menopause, and bless her, she didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
um, like, it's really hard to, yeah, I think even she didn't know it was a thing either. It was, yeah. And unfortunately, I guess when you go through a difficult thing, you sort of learn about yourself and how you cope. And unfortunately, my coping mechanism is denial a bit. So I think maybe, going to that event afterwards, that was the start of a long period of denial.
Oh, interesting. But so great that you have like the self-awareness that you feel like you know yourself well enough to know that those were things that you did. Can I just take it back a moment? You said there were,
Mm.
other than not, the IVF, potentially not being able to have children, the 95%, what were the other implications that you mentioned that she listed off when she told you could happen by having this diagnosis?
Yeah, so so when you go through premature menopause, your body isn't producing estrogen, and your body really needs that. It keeps your body healthy. So some of the health implications are early dementia, heart trouble, weak bones, premature aging. I think those are the main ones I remember.
And is there anything that you can do to try and prevent these?
Yes, absolutely. So by having a hormone replacement, so also known as HRT. So I use an estrogen gel every day, and it's amazing. Honestly, I'm so grateful to science for creating HRT because when I finally got my prescription for it, I think it took about 6 weeks, and my symptoms went away. And so by replacing that estrogen, it's protecting your body in the same way that natural estrogen would.
Okay.
And then another thing is that because my diagnosis took so long, I had a scan for my bone, so it's really important to get a DEXA scan, and found out that I had really weak bones because I hadn't been getting the right amount of estrogen for years. But you can rebuild the strength of your bones through exercise and weight training as well. And I actually had another scan last year and found out that my bones have got stronger, um,
That's
which
awesome.
is really good news.
When you were saying about symptoms and that the gel helped with all your symptoms, are you comfortable sharing
Mm.
what kind of symptoms you're experiencing?
Yeah, I just felt, yeah, I just was not myself. So I guess I was having really irregular periods, but then apart from that, I was just feeling horrendous. I was having flushes during the day. Um, I wasn't sleeping because I was having like night sweat. Felt like basically I was 30 and I felt like an old woman. That's
Okay.
how I felt. I could see it in my face, like my face looked haggard. It was
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah.
It was, yeah, it was something, my body just was really not right.
Yeah. And I know you said that going to that party was the beginning of a period of denial. Would you share
Mm.
what you mean by that?
Yeah, so I guess when I after that appointment, I was referred to a specialist doctor. Well, apparently specialist, although he wasn't great. Um, so I went to that doctor. He gave me some medication. I took it, and that was my limit to dealing with it. I didn't really engage with how it was making me feel emotionally. I didn't look up what this condition was. I didn't check that, what my doctor was prescribing me was the best option for me. I just didn't really want to know. I just kind of wanted to take it and put my hands like over my ears and be like, it's fine.
Yeah.
um, yeah, and I also yeah was just in such a spin as well because there's the physical impact of going through this. It's a real trauma to your body, but there's such a huge emotional impact as well. um, and yeah, that's a thing that needs to be addressed quite separately and is a healing process in itself. And it took me quite a while to be ready to do that, so I sort of pushed that to one side for about a year actually.
Yeah. And with the emotional trauma you experienced, was that based on like the news that you had found out of the implications of what that meant for you?
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of stigma about what menopause is. You associate it with older women. There's like a sort of concept of like being old and dried up and not fertile. It's all these horrible connotations with menopause that are just not true. But like if you I don't know, you watch a sitcom, there will be jokes about it.
Yeah.
It's not a nice thing, it's not a nice word. And I think um, that was something that feeds into you. I think you absorb that, and so being told that that's something you're going through is a real struggle. It felt almost like my life as I knew it was over. I couldn't imagine feeling well and healthy and sort of young again. I just it was yeah, it was awful.
Society's so horrible as well. They're like, "Oh, you're 30. Oh my God, you're old now." And then you're like, "What the heck?" You're getting this
Yeah.
diagnosis. That must have been like, "Oh my God." Um,
Yeah.
but do you feel like you had I heard you say the doctor was horrible. I hear that so often. Would you share, was it bedside manners? What was that?
Um, I think probably because it was just so quick. the appointment. You know, there wasn't really, something that I found throughout until I finally got a good doctor was just there was so much focus on the physical side of it, and
Yeah.
like, right, we'll just get you your hormones. Do you want to freeze your eggs? Like, tick, right, we're done. Off you go, back to your life. And
Yeah.
there was no counselling. There was, you know, she didn't say it in a way that was kind. There was none of that. It was just very, very quick, and there's been no acknowledgement by doctors of the huge emotional impact that it has. Like, I did have some counselling for it, but I had to pay for that myself. That's not something that
That
comes
is
with it.
that's so bad. Were you living in England at the time? Was that on the NHS?
Yes, so the counselling was private, but yeah, the medical care was the NHS. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I think so I've known actually a couple people who've received like a similar diagnosis. And they said
Mm.
the same thing about like the lack of support and also like the doctor just being just so matter of fact. So I'm really
Mm.
sorry that you had to go through that. And it's sad to think because you said that was about 5 years ago that, it still hasn't changed. And even like when I was
Mm.
researching this before we had our discussion, I couldn't believe how like everything, like you were saying, is like very factual. I was like trying to find
Mm.
people's stories and like, I really couldn't find much. Was there anything once you did take the time? I know you said you didn't want to look into it. Did you find the
Mm.
resources or support that you needed once you did?
Yeah, I did in the end. So actually, one of the kindest things that one of my friends did when I wasn't ready to look into it was that she did for me. And she found this charity who are amazing, called the Daisy Network. So they're run by volunteers and they have a website with some really good resources. Um, but one thing they also do is they organise like a network. They have a Facebook group of women all around the world who have experienced this. And yeah, they share their experiences. You can post with questions about anything, and somebody will answer. Um, and that for me was such a big turning point. When I was ready to join that and talk to other women, that just changed everything for me. And it was so powerful to do that. Um, and I remember like looking for books about premature menopause. I couldn't find anything. It was all about, happening to women in their 50s. And
Yeah.
you feel really lonely. You feel really alone. Um, and you feel like you're the only person that this is happening to. And yeah, it meant so much to actually speak to and meet to other women who'd been through exactly the same.
Yeah, when you can actually relate to someone who is going through it. And I think you said 1% of the population goes through this
Yeah, so that's what I read was 1% of women under the age of 40.
after the
Yeah.
age of 40. Yeah, so it's wonderful that, the internet has been able to connect you because finding that one in 100 is quite hard. And people aren't
Mm.
naturally quite open about these things. Do you mind if I ask you how this has impacted you in your experience, talking to people openly about things? I know you said you like to process things privately. Do you feel like you've been
Mm.
able to open up, not just to this group, but to other people more? Or how has this impacted how you talk about yourself in a way?
Yeah, I guess initially I did keep it quite private and I didn't really tell many friends. And yeah, that was something that came up in the counselling, was that, it's, if you don't do that, it's acting as though it's this big dirty secret almost, which it isn't. But equally, it's balancing that with the fact that you don't need to tell everybody everything. So it's
Yes.
making that judgment. And I know one girl who is on a mission to tell everybody and raise awareness, and I really, really respect that. But I'm not quite there, and also that's not my personality. So I am more open talking to people. Recently I spoke with a colleague who's in her late 40s and going through menopause at the more natural age and having an awful time. And I was able to open up to her about my experience and share and give her some advice. And it, you know, it felt good to be able to do that.
And I bet that was really valuable for her as well. And I just think it's so nice when, you know, you do have those private moments where you do feel comfortable as well. I think people need to earn
Mm,
the right to hear your story. I think it is really good that you feel like you're in the place where you share with who you want to. You know, I mentioned I know actually a couple of women who have recently received this diagnosis, and their concern has been, and I think when you said the doctor told you, you're like, I actually don't even know if I want children yet. Like, I haven't processed that. That's been a concern for them as well because they don't know if they want children yet either.
mm.
For you, what was that processing like in that regard?
That was surprisingly difficult actually, because I've never really thought of myself with children. That's not been something that's been on my to-do list, but I guess I was diagnosed at an age where I hadn't had to make the decision.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, my body made that decision for me. So that was quite a shock. And I remember a friend of mine who had been through IVF said to me, right, go to my clinic, see if you can get your eggs frozen as a backup. And yeah, I remember being in this fertility clinic by myself and just sobbing, which was really really a big surprise actually. Um, but yeah, and I guess I found out as well that because I was already going through menopause, it was actually too late for egg freezing. So that was a definite no. But yeah, I guess I'm quite lucky in that I don't want children, and almost in a way it's sort of taken away any pressure because it's not an option for me. So that's just something that I've had to accept, and I can focus my life on doing other things rather than worrying whether it's something that I should do or might miss out on. And so I've been lucky, but I do know other women where it's been really devastating to have that diagnosis, and I really feel for them because I feel I've had a slightly easier experience in that regard.
Yeah. That's really interesting what you said about when, you know, you said that you went to potentially look at the idea of freezing your eggs and they said, actually, it's too late. Is that
Mm,
the case for most women who, you know, once they figure out, you know, like you said, it does take a while to figure out naturally, because I feel like missing your periods and stuff like that is like, I feel like it's quite it's normalized. So I
mm.
feel like a lot of people, this would go undiagnosed for a while. So is it really common that when people do figure it out and they go to freeze their eggs or potentially look into it, that this is the news that they receive, that it might be too late?
I mean, I can only speak from my experience, but yeah, I was told by the doctor that my eggs that were left were at the bottom of the barrel, which is some
Oh
nice
my God.
sensitive language.
Wow. Jeez.
Yeah,
Yes.
I do know that some women do miss the symptoms because they might be on the pill, which contains estrogen, so it might be sort of masking those symptoms.
Oh, as a hormone
Um,
replacement in itself.
exactly. So some women do actually take like the pill as hormone replacement because it has such a high level of estrogen. So yeah, I would say to women who do want children and know definitely, um, just to really keep an eye on it, to have these things tested, because you know we're not told that we can go through early menopause. So it's just really good to have that awareness that that could be an option.
Wow. Actually, I think that's a top tip. That is really interesting because I know so many
Mm.
girls who've come off the pill, and like had irregular periods, but not thought much of it. That's very interesting, and thank you for sharing that. I had a friend who like it didn't get it for 6 months, and maybe this should be something that she looks into. Yeah, I just think it's so important. It's women's issues like this just aren't really that spoken about, in like a casual, non-clinical matter.
Yeah, No, absolutely. And obviously it is rare, but it is just good to have that information and just to know that it can happen.
Yeah. So we've talked about, what it's been like for you and the support you've received. Um, has there been for you kind of, I know we spoke beforehand about a lot of personal development. For you do you feel has come out of this for you? Do you feel like you know yourself better? I know you mentioned knowing about the denial. Has there been anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would like to say to anyone who's diagnosed with this that, it gets so much better. Like when you're first diagnosed, it's like it just takes over your every thought. It's awful, and it just feels like your whole life is going to be shaped by it. Really not. Once you have your medication, you feel so much. You will feel physically better, and you can heal from it emotionally. But also, I think accepting that it takes time, and not trying to rush that, and just make sure you look after yourself. I think it's really taught me not to take your body for granted either. Um, I'd always had medical tests and they'd been fine. It was just a formality. So it was a really big shock to get a negative test, to get a bad result. Um, so yeah, I think knowing to look after your body and really listen to your body, and if something doesn't feel right, to really when you go to the doctors, to really persevere with that, and that you are the person who has to take that initiative and responsibility, for your health as well. And unfortunately, I always trusted doctors that doctors knew everything in the past, and now I do question things. I do look things up, and if a doctor, you know, tells me something and I think, no, that doesn't actually feel right for how I'm feeling, then I will press that, and I will ask for other tests, because we all deserve to have good healthcare, and we don't have to accept it if it's not good enough. You do have a right to ask to be referred elsewhere and to have more tests. So really, really do push for that. That has been a really big learning for me, definitely.
Yeah, that's actually such a top tip. It's true. I feel like we're so blindly taught to like just take like the word of a doctor as gospel.
Mm.
But the wonder as Google can be a terrifying place and you can end up in a dark hole with things like this. It can be so great because the resources are really all there. Final
Mm.
question for you. What advice do you give to people who are trying to support friends and loved ones going through this?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I think it can be difficult, because I think probably I didn't know what I wanted at the time, so it's hard to know what somebody else can know. What is the best thing for you? But as I said, my friend doing that research for me and having that ready for me was amazing. That was so helpful. And I think also not pushing someone to talk about it, but just letting them know that you are there to talk about it is just really, really valuable. And to, ask gently. And if they don't want to talk about it, let it go. But you've put it out there that you are open to speaking about it. Um, and I also think if somebody tells you that this is what they're going through, don't react with shock, react sensitively. Um, don't talk about how awful it is, but try and talk about it as something that's manageable and that can be overcome. And and yeah, I think by just showing that you're there for that person, like that really means everything. They might not be ready to reach out to you and talk to you about it, but just let them know that you're there for when they are ready, definitely.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that because, that's going to be very helpful for me as well. And I know a lot of people who know someone. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and share your experience. Is there any final words you want to say to everyone listening?
If you are, diagnosed with something like this, and it just feels awful, like, just please, just be aware that it becomes, it does fade in its importance, and it becomes part of your story, but it's not your whole story. And it doesn't define who you are. And I just please remember that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time. Have a great day. Thanks so much.
No, thank you for listening. Thank you.
You've been listening to I Can Relate. If you'd like to hear more of these episodes, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. You can do this on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or any other platform you're listening on. To become a part of the community, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Join me next time for another episode. Thanks for listening.